Welcome to Your Next Great Novel, the podcast that tells the story behind the story. I'm your host, Phil Williams. Today I'm going to turn the tables on myself with a guest host, my lovely wife, Denise. She's the perfect person for this because she's read every one of my books and knows me better than anyone. Denise?
Hi, everyone. I'm supposed to take over now. Phil Williams is the author of 14 books. He's a voluntarist author who writes fiction and nonfiction that reflects the reality of our society, the environment, and our state-sponsored oppression. He writes in many genres, but the threads that connect his books are the protagonists that seek the truth and the portrayal of human condition, the good, the bad, and the ugly. When not writing, he can be found tending our permaculture farm. For the people listening, Phil, can you explain the term voluntarist?
A voluntarist is someone that believes all forms of human association should be voluntary. This sounds very basic, and it is. Most people believe that human relationships and associations should be voluntary, but most people deviate from this in their view of the state. Given that all the power from the state is backed by violence, it isn't a voluntary relationship. Therefore, it's an entity that voluntarists oppose. But typically, for people like you and I, when we have friends or even our marriage, these relationships are voluntary. Like I didn't, beat you over the head and say, you need to marry me.
You didn't?
No, I didn't.
Oh, because I thought that's what happened.
Okay. So we have a voluntary relationship. Now, if I put a gun to your face and said, hey, Denise, you have to marry me and you have to do X, Y, and Z, then that would be an involuntary relationship, much like we have with the state.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became an author? The backstory that's not on your website?
Obviously you know all this, but for the
listeners,
for the 5 people out there that are listening. Growing up, I never thought about being a writer. I wanted to be a professional football player, which wasn't a very realistic dream. Of course, being a professional author isn't exactly a very realistic dream either. Anyway, I did play football at a small college, and when I graduated with a degree in sociology, shocker, I couldn't find a job. I was mowing lawns at the time, so I kept doing that, and the business that I started grew along with the housing bubble of the 2000s. I ended up selling that business in 2008, and then you and I, we moved from Northern Virginia to Central Pennsylvania. I bounced around trying 2 different businesses that failed. I wrote a nonfiction book called Fire the Landscaper. And that book talked about why I wanted to get out of the landscape business and what's wrong with how we maintain our properties and how we could more naturally. I really enjoyed the process, and the book actually, it still sells a few copies and people write nice reviews. Then I had an idea for a novel, so I wrote Against the Grain. That was my first published novel. And I enjoyed that even more than the nonfiction, and people seemed to like that story. I got a lot of nice reviews. At the time, I was trying to get my permaculture consultancy off the ground. I had trouble getting enough business. So my writing, I was selling more books than I was getting permaculture consultants. So I just kept writing and doing less and less permaculture. So that's kind of how it all happened.
It seems like you keep having this common thread of permaculture, and I know we're immersed in it, but a lot of people really don't know what that means. So for our listeners, can you please define the term permaculture?
Right. Yeah, I forget that everybody else doesn't know what this is. Permaculture is a design science that mimics nature. I actually took a couple of what they call them PDCs, or permaculture design courses. It's the development of agricultural ecosystems intended to be sustainable and self-sufficient. I really love permaculture, but for the most part, people aren't that interested in living sustainably. I mean, they're interested in the idea of it, but it's not an easy lifestyle. It's something that you and I try to do here. We're not 100% sustainable, and I don't know that we ever will be. Not an easy lifestyle. It's much easier to waste energy, to be comfortable all the time, to throw everything in the garbage, to buy new instead of fix things, to buy all your food from the grocery store. But we wanted to live in a way that was more sustainable, more down to earth, more in touch with what it means to be a human being. So we decided to grow a good chunk of our own food. We raise chickens and bees. We've planted over 2,000 trees on our property and put in 4 ponds. We probably get about 50 to 60% of our food off the land. And then we also, of course, are growing herbs and medicinal plants too.
And, in addition for it to be sustainable, it's also a lot healthier lifestyle. Right now, you and I are both suffering for some winter illnesses, but usually we're never sick and are in quite good health. All this sounds pretty good to me, but why wouldn't more people want to do this?
I think a lot of people do. They love the idea, and I think a lot of people do want to do it, but it requires time and labor, a lot of time and labor. Anyway, I personally love living as sustainably as we can. There's a lot of joy in that. I had a problem with depression, as you know, and I think living this way has helped me. I also think writing has been a huge help. It's an outlet to work on my own inner demons. A lot of my books, there's a lot of personal material in there, things that, I know firsthand that I've included in the books that, obviously I do it for realism, but I also do it, I think, for my own emotional benefits.
I think that really helps people, though, when they hear other people going through something that's similar to themselves. It always helpful to hear how other people handle it and how they sort of express themselves in different ways, whether it be forms of art or therapy or whatever it may be, whatever it helps. How you can channel pain in your life to help others.
I definitely have benefited from including pieces of me in the stories. Just people that you meet, places that you've been. Just about every book that I've written takes place in a place that we lived. So there's that realism. A lot of the topics and the themes are things that are important to me, either things that I've been through or things that I find important.
Your newest novel, The Predator Hunter, is about a 20-something that trolls the internet for child predators. He catfishes them and meets them in real life armed with a camera. He then posts his confrontations online, ruining the lives of these predators. The book is very gritty and raw and honest. You show intimate conversations between Kyle and the predators. Can you talk about the research and what it was like to write these scenes? I'm sure if you talked about your inner demons earlier, I'm sure that writing these scenes like this definitely had probably effect on your psyche as well.
It was difficult. The Predator Hunter it's basically about like you said, it's about a guy that's catfishing pedophiles, essentially. He's trying to bring them out into the open and expose them online and humiliate them. So this isn't a new idea, by the way. I don't know if you remember To Catch a Predator with, who's the guy? What was the guy's name?
Hansen.
Chris Hansen. So Chris Hansen did To Catch a Predator about a decade ago, and that's exactly what they did. And there are actually guys on YouTube now that are doing this, where they actually are contacting these guys, talking to them as if they are a little boy or a little girl, and bringing these predators out into the open and then filming the confrontations. So it's a real thing. And I did a lot of research, psychological research on pedophiles. I watched a bunch of old episodes of To Catch a Predator. I also watched the YouTube videos that I mentioned. The thing that was difficult is I really had to figure out how a pedophile would actually lure a child from the internet to an offline meeting. So even though in the book the predators don't know that they're talking to the protagonist, Kyle, they think they're talking to a child. So I had to be able to be Kyle in the book and talk like a child. At the same time, I had to be the predator in the book and say these awful things to try to get these kids into these meetings. And what was really shocking and disturbing to me,
that had to be really difficult.
Yeah, it was brutal. It was brutal. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you want to take a shower at the end of the day. I mean, it's just really awful. But at the same time, as much as it's awful for me to like read about this stuff or watch these videos. I mean, imagine what kids that have been abused have to deal with. That's nothing, right? I mean, so it's not a complaint really.
What I think is interesting is just like, To Catch a Predator and, these YouTube people is the amount of people that they get. Like, it's not hard. There's so many people lining up for this. I mean, it just makes me wonder about what's going on with people in our society, that there's just no lack of predators.
Yeah, I mean, I remember an episode where I forget what house or what city they were in for To Catch a Predator, but literally they had guys coming one after another, and they were having trouble getting the guy arrested and out of there, but before the next guy showed up.
That's
crazy.
They
it was like an inexhaustible amount of guys willing to come to these houses to hook up with children. The really scary thing is in my opinion, based on all the research that I did, I think most of these guys actually are not pedophiles, which makes it infinitely more creepy to me. They're just basically douchebags that want to hook up with young girls and take advantage of them. And I think that is so much more prevalent than people even want to touch with a 10-foot pole. And that's the thing that really I found very, very disturbing. It's not that a pedophile is not disturbing, but at least with a pedophile, it's like, hey, that person has a problem. Like, that person can't control themselves. They need to figure out a way. Personally, if I were a pedophile, I'd want to be castrated and then just live a life as an asexual person.
Right.
At least then you could live a moral life. But if you're just a douchebag that wants to get with young girls, that is even more disturbing. It's also even more prevalent, which is why it's so disturbing.
Right. It's like they have so much insecurity that they only feel comfortable around people that they can take advantage of. It's, it's something that I see in a lot of facets of our society, and it's really disturbing. And, I don't know if our listeners know this, but I'm a teacher, and I taught middle school for a very, very long time. And I can't imagine an adult wanting to, in that regard, be with a child like that. And this is the age of the kids that we're talking about. I mean, it's really disturbing. I mean, yes, some of these kids might look older, but, you hear them talk and what they're interested in. I mean, they're still just kids.
Well, a lot of times, I think in To Catch a Predator, they were using 15 and 16-year-old kids. Now, granted, that's high school age, but still horrendous.
Right.
But I think with the younger ones, you're getting more into the pedophiles.
Yes.
With the high school age kids, you're getting into the creeps.
Yeah,
and
I would agree with that.
And I think the creeps vastly outnumber the pedophiles. Anyway, so I actually picked an excerpt for The Predator Hunter. And I'm going to read the narrator. I'm going to read Kyle, who's the main protagonist, and Denise is going to read Kyle's lovely date. Great. All right, you ready? Chapter 1, Crowded Loneliness. Kyle Summers stood in the waiting area, holding the restaurant pager and watching the entrance. The revolving door bustled with well-to-do people coming and going. The 3-story brick restaurant was busy as usual. He'd had to park across the street at the grocery store. He glanced at his outfit. I need some new clothes. He wore a button-down shirt, khakis, and work boots, his best ensemble, but obviously many years old and a bit baggy for the current fashion trends. One of his phones buzzed in his pocket. Lori.
I just parked. Be there in a minute.
Kyle. See you soon. Dumbass. Why did I text an exclamation point? I already looked needy and desperate. I am needy and desperate. Relax. Keep it together. It would be better if she didn't know that. She stepped from the revolving door, looking even better than her profile picture. Curves in the right places, round face, large brown eyes, and a button nose. He approached her, weaving in and out of the middle-aged clientele waiting for a table. She looked around, her shiny chestnut hair moving around her shoulders like a freaking shampoo commercial. Beautiful, and out of my league. It wasn't that Kyle was ugly. He was actually fairly handsome underneath his outdated clothes. He had short dark hair, a square jaw, and a symmetrical face. He was fit and young in his mid-20s, but he wasn't exceptional in any way, and he felt deficient in many ways. Moving closer, he smiled as he caught her eye. Her eyes narrowed for a split second, giving him a once-over, then a tight smile. Lori? He asked, still smiling.
Kyle?
She replied, her smile gone. Thank you for coming out. He held up the restaurant pager. Hopefully our table will be ready soon. I did call ahead seating, but they still make you wait.
This place is crazy, especially on a Saturday night. I've waited 2 hours before.
It shouldn't be too much longer. I've been here for 45 minutes. She furrowed her brows.
Did I get the time wrong?
Oh, no. I came early so you wouldn't have to wait too long. Lori smiled, the expression reaching her eyes.
That's really nice of you. Thank you.
No problem. The pager buzzed and the red lights blazed. They'd been chosen. They were led upstairs by a hostess. He walked behind Lori, purposely diverting his eyes from her butt in those skinny jeans. They sat in a cozy corner booth, perusing their menus. Her phone sat face up on the table. They ordered beers and filet mignon with cauliflower mash and salad and bread that tasted like donuts. Kyle grinned to himself. Maybe she's the one. We ordered the same thing, like an old married couple. He handed his menu to the young waitress after she had taken their orders. Lori's phone buzzed. She scrolled and tapped for a few minutes. Kyle watched, his optimism fading by the second. Finally, she looked up.
So,
Lori said, folding her hands in her lap.
You're in construction?
He nodded. Landscape construction and maintenance. That's why I don't have a lot of clothes. Everything gets dirty. She scrunched her nose as if she'd smelled something foul. Why did I say that?
You, work outside? I thought you ran the company.
His stomach tumbled. No, I work for the company.
Are you, a manager or something?
He dipped his head as if being scolded. No.
So you, work on a crew or something?
Yes. Lori sighed.
I didn't know white people did landscaping around here.
They generally don't.
Then why do you?
Her face was twisted in disgust. It pays the bills? Her phone buzzed. She tapped and thumb-typed. You seem disappointed, Kyle said. She still thumb-typed. You seem disappointed, he said louder. She set down her phone.
I heard you the first time.
Are you?
Disappointed?
Yes.
No, I don't know you. I don't know you well enough to be disappointed. I'm annoyed, not disappointed.
Why are you annoyed? Just because I work for a landscaping company? Lori blew out a breath.
You said you were in construction. That implies that you own the company or at least have a decent job, and your profile says you're 6 feet tall. I bet you're more like 5'10".
The waitress set their beers on the table. Thank you, Kyle said to the young waitress.
Your salads will be out shortly.
She replied and turned on her sneakers, leaving them alone again. Kyle turned back to Lori. Every guy on Match adds at least 2 inches to their height. If I put 5'10", people would think I was 5'8". She shrugged and took a swig of her beer.
You asked why I'm annoyed, and I'm telling you.
Kyle rubbed his eyes with his thumb and index finger. Working in landscaping isn't my main job. I do something else.
And what is that?
While she had asked the question, she didn't seem to care about hearing his response. I hunt pedophiles. He drank a bit of beer. She leaned forward, her eyes widening.
You what?
I hunt and expose pedophiles.
Like guys who like little girls?
And boys. The waitress dropped off their salads. After the waitress left, Lori asked,
Do you work for the police?
No, I work by myself. Well, mostly by myself. My friend Troy films for me.
I don't understand. You don't work for the police, but you hunt and expose pedophiles.
Yes. Kyle took a bite of his salad and washed it down with some beer.
But how do you do it? You can't, arrest them.
I meet up with these guys and confront them on video. Then I give the evidence to the police.
What evidence?
Lori dug into her salad. I pose as young girls and boys online. I chat on Whisper and Kick and Grindr, and I have fake profiles on a bunch of dating sites. I chat with these guys until they wanna meet.
You have to be 18 on those dating sites.
My profiles say 19, but I tell the guys I'm 13 or 12 when they contact me, and my profile pictures are of people who look very young. Then I meet and confront them about why they wanted to meet a 12-year-old girl or whatever. She narrowed her eyes.
Where do you get the profile pictures?
When I started, I bought images from Shutterstock. I'm not sure if that was legal, but now my audience sends me pictures to use. The pictures are of people who are adults now, but from when they were kids.
What about the police?
I give the evidence to the police and then post everything online, so everyone knows who these pedophiles are. Lori set down her fork and scrunched her face.
You, talk to these pervs?
He nodded.
What do they say?
All sorts of things. Sometimes the conversations are non-sexual, but sometimes they're not. I get a lot of penis pictures. It's awful. Kyle shook his head. But if they're talking to me, that's one less child they're talking to. And when I confront them, everyone knows who they are, so they're less likely to hurt a child in the future.
How many guys have you gotten the police to arrest?
Kyle cleared his throat. None, but I just gave this detective a bunch of evidence.
Where do you post the videos?
YouTube and Facebook mainly, plus my website.
Do you have a lot of followers?
Not yet, but it's growing. Lori frowned.
How are people going to, see that these guys are pedophiles if nobody watches your videos?
Like I said, I'm getting more followers, and the police are going to make arrests.
But they haven't made any arrests.
Not yet.
How can you even talk to these freaks?
It's not easy, but I guess I'm kind of numb to the stuff they say. She pursed her lips.
Do you, get off on it?
Kyle sat up straighter. No, why would you think that?
Because normal people wouldn't want anything to do with these pervs.
What about cops and Chris Hansen?
They actually arrest these guys. They don't friend them online. It's weird.
She crossed her arms over her chest. I'm not friending them. I don't ever bring up the sex stuff. I have a code. She looked over her shoulder.
Where's the bathroom?
It's downstairs.
I'll be right back.
Lori grabbed her purse, slid from the booth, stepped downstairs, and disappeared into the crowd. Kyle sat alone, feeling self-conscious, eating his salad. He glanced around at the tables of happy couples and groups. He thought about loneliness and how it's much worse in a crowd. That's it. That was the clip. Of course, Lori doesn't actually come back to the table. Kyle is left with 2 meals to take home for himself.
Yeah, she's real understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Why did you pick that excerpt to share? What makes it personally relevant to you?
Well, first
Is
of all...
that how I acted when we first went out? Is that why you picked that?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
No. That is one of the first places...
that we did go on a date, yes.
Yeah. So I went...
But I didn't act like that, though.
No, of course not. So I didn't want to ruin the book for people. So the first chapter did make some sense, but the first chapter was very relevant to me personally because the restaurant is modeled after Mike's American Grill in Springfield, Virginia, which is a restaurant that you and I have been to on many occasions. One of our first dates was there, I think. Not our first date, but maybe second or third.
Right.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Also, Kyle feels very self-conscious about, he's a landscaper, he mows grass for a living, and that was me at one point. I was somebody who was mowing grass for a living. I had a blue-collar job, and that was not very prestigious in a place where that's all everybody cared about was money and prestige. And I didn't have very many clothes, and my clothes were dirty, and I can kind of relate to sort of what he's going through. Do you remember what I said to you when we first started dating?
Yeah, we weren't. It was at a different place, but we weren't at Mike's American Grill. But yeah, you said you would probably wear the same thing over and over again because you don't have a lot of clothes without grass stains.
Right, exactly. So I guess I can really identify with how he's feeling. Also with his feelings of loneliness as an introvert. How he says that he thinks about how loneliness is worse when you're in a crowd. And I think as an introvert, I definitely feel that way. When I'm in a crowd of people that I don't know, it's much more lonely than being actually alone.
So let's shift gears now. What is probably your biggest failure as an author?
I think my biggest failure is it's ongoing. My goal as an author is to write the truth to the best of my ability and to sell enough of my work to make a decent living. And 98% of authors don't make a living from their writing. So I'm trying to break into the top 2% of worldwide authors. I'm still not there. I mean, it depends. I'm probably at least in the top 10% at this point, but it's still a long, long way. I think it's easier to get into the top 10% than it is to get from 10% to the top 2%, if that makes sense. It's probably easier to get into the top 10% than to go from 10 to 5% even. I'm still not there. Admittedly, I have a long way to go. So to get there, I keep working and promoting and grinding. I mean, you see the hours that I put in. So hopefully I'll get there at some point.
Yes. And for as many hours you do work, I'm sure that you will. How are you different than the million other authors on Amazon?
I think differentiating yourself from the millions of other authors on Amazon is a big problem for new authors and even existing authors because they literally are millions of authors on Amazon. And the majority of them never sell anything. The majority of the authors on Amazon literally sell nothing. And they spend, a tremendous amount of time and effort to produce their work, but yet they're never able to find an audience. And that's and I think that the idea of dying in obscurity is much worse than not making money. So I think that if you're able to be read and people enjoy your work and you're very good at what you do, I think you have a shot. But it's by no means is it easy because you still have to figure out the marketing. And I think what makes me different, because there are a lot of thriller authors out there, and I don't just write thrillers. Obviously, I write in a lot of genres, but I'm one of the few thriller authors with protagonists that aren't police officers, government agents, or soldiers. I'm writing from the perspective of voluntarism and the non-aggression principle. So I believe that there are only two things we need to understand morality. First, it's the golden rule, which is do unto others as you'd have them do to you. And second is that morality is universal, meaning that morality is the same for every person and every institution. For example, stealing is immoral for you, just like it's immoral for me or for a group of people or for a government for that matter. These concepts sound simple. They really do, but every one of us has been subjected to propaganda to make us believe that government and government actors are granted power that legitimize immoral acts that we would never condone if a regular citizen did the exact same thing. So some other big concepts that I like to portray in my novels are nature and minimalism. Coming from a permaculture background, I'm very in tune to the environment. That's something that's really important to me. I'd like to think that there are some profound messages surrounding kind of the action and intrigue that you'll find in my thriller novels. I use a lot of real news and information and I'll put it in a fiction novel. For example, Sedition. At the end of Sedition, there's a very long bibliography of where the information came from, because a lot of the information in the book is real. It's a lot of stuff that people don't know about, but it's all real, and I wanted to include a way for people to find the sources and verify these things for themselves.
What is the most controversial book that you've ever written, and why?
I did a book called The Propaganda Project, so I learned a lot about propaganda, and I think that it's a very scary topic because it really makes you question how much of what you know is really your own thoughts and how much of what you know is just culture bias and propaganda from not just from the media and government schools, but also from your friends and family. That bit of propaganda can be every bit as strong as what the propaganda most people would think of as like the media. But without a doubt, The Propaganda Project, which is a nonfiction book, the reason why that one's the most controversial is because when I put it in fiction, it doesn't really offend people near as much because it's part of the story, and I'd like to think that I can write a nice story and people enjoy it and they have fun. And I've had those reviews where I get like, oh, I really love the story, but I totally disagree with the viewpoints of blah 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 character, and that's fine. I mean, I'm happy that people are reading the books even if they totally disagree. That's not a problem. But with The Propaganda Project, since it's nonfiction, it's much more in your face as far as the ideas. So therefore, I think it triggers people a lot more to be upset by the content. For example, some of the things that I tackle in that book are, why are people patriotic? And I try to prove that all governments, simply because of how they obtain their revenue, are inherently immoral and evil. To say the least, most people are not going to agree with that statement at all. But I go to it's a 350-page book with over 100 sources and 660 footnotes of information, basically trying to prove that government is immoral, at least in the way it's structured now, with using taxation backed by force and violence.
And just a little bit of background on how Phil and I grew up. I mean, a lot of people I know after Propaganda Project, they always like to pin Phil in some of the reviews as, oh, you must be this, you must be that. They want to put everybody in a category as far as like Democrat, Republican, anarchist, libertarian, whatever. And, Phil and I, growing up, I actually grew up Catholic, Democrat. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a truck driver. And Phil grew up actually, more Republican, military background, things like that. So we do come to the table with some very different points of view, and you'd think that maybe that would have, especially living in DC, that would have caused, us any angst when we first got together. But I think the fact that neither one of us really overly thought about those things in a very serious realm, like, again, we didn't define ourselves by that term.
I think the world is different now. Like, it seems like everybody's political now.
It does seem that way.
And when you and I got together...
Nobody in the 90s cared. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I mean, when you and I got together, we never talked about politics, ever.
They were too busy with watching 90210.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we never talked about politics. We never... it wasn't even really much of a discussion. I think what got me was reading the book creature from Jekyll Island.
Yeah.
And once you realize how much is actually controlled by basically the central banks of the world, and then you learn about how the majority of wars over the years they've started with lies. The Gulf of Tonkin never happened. I know this stuff sounds crazy, and I'm not a huge conspiracy theorist, but once you learn the truth behind some of these things, the sinking of the Lusitania, that's a really dirty thing that happened, and for World War I to get the United States into the war. And once you learn how much that the government lies, and how much is how much, and it's not just the U.S. government. That's just what governments do. They lie. It's about power and control over the people. It's not about our protection. They'll say that they're there for our protection or for to serve us, but in reality, when it comes down to it, when push comes to shove, it's about protecting their own power. And once you learn the history behind some of these things, it's hard to trust anything that they ever say again, because they're constantly lying. One of the reasons why that really bothered me so much is I have a real issue with lying. I don't like people that lie, and I certainly don't like groups of people or institutions or anything else that are misleading people.
Right. And I think that's probably, if we ever did have it, like you said, we didn't really have those conversations, but that's something that you and I both have very much in common, and you talk about people when they get together about, people say, well, it works if you really need to value the same things. And that is one thing that you and I definitely value is honesty. That is something that just bothers us both to the core. When people are dishonest and manipulative, it probably bothers you and I more than just about anything else. And it is disheartening to hear all this. I think another thing, I think a lot of people know this, dirty politicians, an honest politician, could you ever find one, all the jokes. But I think when you really break it down the way you did in Propaganda Project, it's disturbing. And they don't know how to handle it. It really upsets them because it's just it almost puts you in a place of hopelessness.
But not all my books are controversial like that. But the big thing is, the big theme that you'll find is protagonists that are searching for the truth. Because that's, for me,
Right.
For me personally, that's a big thing. I don't want to support anything that's not telling the truth, or I don't want to be lied to and not be aware of it.
Right.
And
Not all the books are quite that heavy. That one is particularly heavy.
Right, yeah. They're not all that heavy. So what's your favorite book of mine, and why would you say?
Well, that's hard. And I like them all. And I'm not just saying that because you're my husband and I'm sitting here next to you talking to you. But the ones that really stick out for me are probably Rumors, which isn't out yet, where, you're still working on that one. Against the Grain, Initiation, The Predator Hunter, and Stone Lake. Though I do like them all. I very much have really enjoyed them all. I can relate to these characters. I enjoy the love relationships that you portray. I'm probably a little bit of a rom-com. That's probably a little bit cheesy of me. I have to admit, I like rom-coms. Above everything else, again, I like that you talked about your theme of honesty that runs through all your books. And books like Against the Grain and Initiation, they actually take place in high schools. And, me being a teacher, it's particularly interesting. And Rumors does too. Yeah. That's particularly interesting to me, how you play that out. And sometimes I know I get interested because I have a personal investment. Sometimes you'll ask me questions, and some things are based on information that I come home and tell you. And one thing that makes Phil such a fantastic author is that he has, and I always joke with him about, he has the memory of an elephant. I mean, it is great that Phil remembers everything, though being his wife, sometimes it's not so great that he remembers everything.
Right.
But he does, though. I mean, I'll come home and I'll tell him a story and then I'll forget. He's like, well, didn't you say that was such and such? I'm like, how did you even remember that? And that is just something that is a gift of his. And I think that's what makes him such a phenomenal writer, and he has such a great way of putting things together, and you can just read it and imagine it so quickly. It's just such a joy. I'm an English, I used to be an English teacher. Now I'm an elementary gifted support teacher, but I was a middle school English teacher for a very long time, and so I've read a ton of books. And I do have to say that Phil's books I probably read the fastest out of just any author I've ever read. read. So, I mean, he just really has a talent for that. You can't believe it's over already.
So writing page turners.
Right. So he's excellent writing page turners. I really like how you're so good at dialogue. Phil is a textbook introvert, but he is very good. He's a very good listener, and he's very well spoken. So his dialogue is very real, and it's it is definitely very fitting. And I think that's one of the reasons why his books read so quickly, is because he just has excellent dialogue. I mean, you feel like you're really there.
Well, that's nice of you to say.
That's true.
Well, it's helpful to have. For example, I'm looking at my wall right now, and I have these characters. For the new book, that not for Rumors, but for the next book, which I have a working title of Psycho Island, but I don't know if that's going to make it once this book is finished. But I think it's going to be 3 books. But I'm looking at the characters. When I write a scene, I'll look at the characters and I have their pictures. So I'll pull pictures off the internet of just various people. So if I'm looking for a middle-aged woman, I'll type middle-aged woman into Google and find some face or some picture of somebody that looks kind of like the character that I'm thinking of. Then I'll put her picture on there, and then I'll write up a whole thing about everything from height and weight, physical descriptions, occupations, age, their mental description, temperament, background, how they talk, any tics or any idiosyncrasies that they have, what they want out of life. So I try to give them a real story, even for supporting characters. Try to give them a real story, and that way, when I put them in a scene with another character, then I can say, okay, not what I would do. What would that character with that background do? What would they say? How would they say it? What exactly would be their reaction in these different circumstances? So I think it helps if you go into that detail of getting to know your characters. So I'll write so for example, for this book that's going to be 3 books, I'll write probably 15 to 20,000 words plus pictures just on the character profiles, and then probably another 50,000 words just in the plot outline. And that's before I'll even write a single word of the book. So it's basically like I'll write a novel before I write 3. So I'll write a novel just in prep, and then I'll write 3 novels, if it's a 3-book series.
Wow, that's really impressive. Do you think that your experience of moving around a lot, being in the military, being in a lot of different places and cities, do you think that that has helped you? Really, you said about how much time you develop these characters. Do you think that has helped you develop some of these characters because you've seen different, some different cultures and been around a lot of, and been in the new kid where you are in that observational stage? Do you think that's helped you?
That's a good point. I had never thought about it that way. Yeah, probably. When you're the new kid, I've been the new kid in a lot of schools, and when you're the new kid, you don't really say much. You observe a lot more. Maybe that definitely helps. Well, for example, different locations is nice too, because when I want to use another location in the book, for example, this one coming up, I'm planning to have Panama. They're going to end up in Panama at some point, so it'll be a little bit more of an exotic locale. But I've lived there, so I know what it's like there. So I'll be able to have some realism for what the place is like. But yeah, so I definitely think that helps. So why don't we try to get the things that you don't like, since maybe they don't want to hear about how great I am all the time.
They might want to hear that.
Yeah, they might want to hear that. So what would be your least favorite book, and also what would be... Well, I guess we'll get to that. So why don't we just start with the least favorite book?
Well, it's probably the book that we actually spent some time talking about. It's probably Propaganda Project. It's a good book with tons of really great information, and I love the survey, and I loved helping with it. But it's nonfiction, and I guess I'm, kind of a child at heart, but it's just not quite as fun as the others, and it's probably not as enlightening to me because I've been with you this whole time. So I know some of those things. So I like when I very much enjoy when you put those aspects in a fictional story, because it's fun for me to hear them in that way. When I just hear them straight up, like in Propaganda Project, I like it. It's not that I don't, but I don't enjoy it as much as I do. I feel like a child, I feel like a 2-year-old saying that I don't enjoy it as much unless it's a part of a story, something like that. But that is kind of the way I feel.
That makes sense. Is there anything in general that you don't like besides just the Propaganda Project being the least liked book? Is there something in general about my writing that you don't like?
Well, I do, I guess, like, if you're talking about characterization or something like that, I don't like when you kill off characters that I like. I get upset about that. And sometimes that happens way too much. There's been times when, we're reading, I'm Phil's beta reader, and he'll, write all day, and then at night, after dinner, he'll sit and he'll read me the chapter that he wrote. And I'll say, Phil, seriously, if you kill off that character, I'm going to be seriously mad at you. I like them.
I am guilty of killing off characters. I know one ending in particular you didn't like, which was No Conscience.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why most of my books are on Amazon are around 4.5 to 4.7. But,
which is really good.
Yeah, which is great. The reviews have been fantastic. But No Conscience, I think it's 4.2. And I think the reason it's lagged is because people don't like it that the ending is not complete. Like it's not you don't get everything you want out of the ending, and that was one of, I don't want to give it away from people.
Right.
But I wrote it the ending because it felt very real to me.
Right.
And that's why I wrote it that way, and I didn't want to write something that was fake just to give people what they wanted, but people want what they want. So
Right. I know I mentioned it's not that, it's not one of those books we hate it and you're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it ended that way. It was not like that. It's just that you just would be like, just a little more. It was kind of like that. But I do agree with Phil though. It is much more, it is much more of an honest ending.
Right. So my big thing is like I want to try to write the truth to the best of my ability. So if I think the character would do X, Y, and Z, but if I made it do A, B, and C, that would be more fun. I'm not going to do A, B, and C because that's not what the character would do.
Right.
So I try to stay true as best I can to the characters, knowing full well that the situations I'm writing are crazy. Right. I mean, they're meant to be exciting and out of the ordinary. But at the same time, they're also meant to be possible and plausible. As long as they're possible, you just can't. For me, I don't want to write things that are obviously I'm just contriving the incident. And a lot of times I'll change the plot. Like I'll write a plot outline, and then as I'm writing the story, I realize, oh, they're not going to do that now. They're going to do this other thing. So then I have to change the whole plot from that point forward, right. Which isn't a problem, but that does happen a lot. So is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, actually, I recently, you know how I like psychology.
Yes.
So I recently,
by the way, Denise reads like all sorts of psychology stuff, listens to audiobooks about psychology.
Yeah. I'm a fan of Brene Brown.
Used to get Psychology Today and
right. Stole Psychology Today
yes.
from a doctor's office.
Yeah.
They said I could. They said I ask. Yeah. So speaking of that, yesterday, so recently I read an article, and it was about the importance about choosing your values. And it was written, it says, because in today's world, we need to do a better job of creating a modern mind for this modern world so that we can directly connect our behavior with what we deeply value. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And I want to say, and when I read that, you and I were talking about this, about doing the podcast and everything. And one of the things I thought of is I think your books actually helps readers do that. I think that they help, people kind of choose what their values are so you can connect your behavior with what you deeply value. And I think that goes along with a lot of the nature just being more connected. And I think it helps your readers. I think it helps people peel back the curtain to show what really matters to them. And I think because you show your characters living a life of, guided about what they value and leading a life that is genuinely themselves.
Like, I'm not sure I fully understand. I didn't read everything that you read, so right. I'm not sure I fully understand what that author meant by modern mind. But I would imagine like what a modern mind would need would be able to decipher the truth from a lie.
Exactly.
Because that I can't even begin to tell you how important that is, because there's just so much misinformation and lies out there that people are chasing, because there's just so much content everywhere on social media, on cable, on Netflix, everywhere you go, there's information all over the place. It's kind of like Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, where they were just literally inundated with information that nobody could. It wasn't like information was constricted like it is in George Orwell's 1984. But Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, they had so much information that people just couldn't decipher
right.
what the truth from a lie was. And also there was so much entertainment that they didn't care anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think that's kind of where we are now, where there's just so much entertainment that people don't really care. And then the stuff that they do care about, a lot of times they're chasing lies. And it's not easy to be able to decipher the truth from a lie, and that requires a tremendous amount of brain power and thought. When I was doing my research about propaganda, is that we're not wired to spend tremendous amounts of time figuring things out, as far as figuring out lies from truth. Like if we can look at something and we can get a cursory, like a glance at it, and then the person tells us something and we can just take their word at face value, that's what our mind wants to do, because that takes the least amount of brain power, because basically we're trying to conserve that brain power for things like, I don't know, getting food, things that are really, really important. So now when we're faced with a scenario of I'm scrolling through my Facebook feed and I see these headlines from people that I like, I'm just going to believe everything that's in there, as opposed to like, oh, let me spend 3 hours tracking back all the sources and try to figure out if this is true or not. Nobody wants to do that.
Like most authors, I'm assuming that you do a lot of reading. You're not just blessed with, a beautiful mind where you just know everything. So what do you like to read?
I read just about anything and everything for the most part. And I also write just about anything and everything, which I think has been a problem for me as far as gaining traction as an author, because I'm in all these different genres. It's harder for me to gain a following, I think, because I'm skipping around genres. But I think ultimately the writing ends up being better because I'm exploring different areas. But I read a lot of, I probably read the most actually nonfiction, even though I've only written 2 nonfiction books. Out of the 14 I've written, only 2 of them are nonfiction, but I probably read more nonfiction than anything else. And I think that actually really helps my fiction, because I'm learning real things that end up in the stories. But I do love fiction, so I'll read thrillers, literary fiction. I even read the odd romance novel. I love the way couple authors I really like. Fiction authors would be like Tom Perrotta.
Yeah, he's really good.
Yeah, I really like it. He gets terrible reviews.
Yeah,
go on Amazon, type in Tom Perrotta, and check out his reviews. They're all in the 3s. I don't understand it.
He's another one, does a great job of dialogue and really putting things real. I like his work too.
The way he criticizes suburbia is it's really funny, and it's just really spot on. I just think he's really smart. And I also, from nonfiction, I do like Malcolm Gladwell. I like kind of how he looks at the world in a different way. And lately, you and I both have enjoyed IQ, which is Joe Ide's thriller series.
Yeah, it's really good.
That's really good. And he doesn't get particularly good. He has I think his is he's rated right around 4.1. He doesn't get particularly great reviews either, but I actually think it's really, really good. Like Joe Ide, how he took 2 plot lines. Like he took a plot line, almost like a flashback plot line, and then a current plot line, and then the way he weaved them together.
Yeah, he's really good at that.
That's really a hard thing to do. I don't think I would ever attempt to do that. I don't usually like it in books. I usually find it confusing and annoying. But I think, especially in the first book, I think he did a really good job of making that work.
Yeah, he did. He did a really good job. I mean, it's definitely something that I usually, especially with like mystery books, I grew up watching a lot of. My mom is a huge fan of, police shows and mystery shows, and usually by the first scene, I always point out, I'm like, oh, such and such did it. And Phil was like, how did you know that? And I was like, probably because I watched a million mystery shows and police shows with my mom growing up. And reading Walker Texas Ranger, yeah. I never realized what really happens. He keeps me guessing until the very end, and I'm not someone that's easy to do.
That's true.
So, speaking of books, I think we did a good job of promoting the IQ series there. What book would you recommend to the audience and why?
You want me to pick one?
Yeah, why don't you pick one and talk about it?
So I would recommend The Crash Course by Chris Martinson.
Okay.
It's a nonfiction book, and it's based on the premise. And to be honest with you, this is a huge theme in just about all of my books, what I'm about to tell you. And I think a lot of this information originated from Chris, and then also from his work, and then from others. But probably the main guy that I got a lot of this particular theme, which I think is unbelievably important. And it's based on the premise that we live on a finite planet. Okay, that's not controversial, I don't think. But we have an economic system that we've created. It must grow exponentially, or it falls apart. So in 2008, you saw what happened. We had, what was it, like -1 or 2% growth, and the whole thing fell apart. It was the end of the world, and it was hardly even a setback. And that's the economic system, that we have to grow exponentially or it falls apart. So that means that every single year we're using more and more resources. We are buying more and more stuff. We are creating more and more waste. And the way exponential functions work is that it speeds up at the end. So things might seem like nothing's happening, everything's fine, and then right at the end, things get really out of control. This idea that we live on a finite planet, but yet our economic system requires exponential growth is a big, big problem. And this is the reason why you see governments of the world always say, we got to grow, because that's the way the economic system is set up. Got to grow. That's their singular function, is to grow. And it's not conducive to living on a planet in harmony, right? Because we're doing things that are not sustainable, which, and by definition, not sustainable means they will end at some point.
So Phil, to kind of sum this up, where can people, find out about you and your books?
If you go to Amazon, just type in Phil M. Williams. Make sure you use my middle initial M. Apparently, I'm not the most popular Phil Williams, which is very sad. But
I'm not the most popular Denise Williams.
No,
because I did not sing "Let's Hear It for the Boy."
Right. But I can't. I don't know a Phil. I don't even know a Phil Williams. But I know that every time I type in Phil Williams, there's another author that apparently sells more books than me and gets his name above mine. So my goal, my immediate goal, is to beat my alternate twin, Phil Williams. But until then, you just type in Phil M. Williams on Amazon. You'll find my page. Or you can go to my website, which is philwbooks.com. And on my website, on the homepage, if you want to sign up to my email list, I'll give you a gift copy of Against the Grain. So you sign up to the email list, and basically it automatically emails you a copy of Against the Grain that you can download into whatever e-reader you like to use. And then
it's definitely worth it. It's a great read.
Thank you. The other thing is like the email list. I email the people on my list twice a month. So whenever I have a sale or a free book going on, I let everybody know. And then I usually write personal stuff in there too, which is interesting. Like just recently, I had a picture from like when I was in high school that my younger brother sent me. I put that in there with a little story just to give people a better feel for who I am. And people seem to like that stuff.
Yeah, you get to see 15-year-old Phil.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Anyway, so thank you for listening. This is the end of the first episode. From here on out, what's going to happen is Denise and I will do a book club every other episode. And so next episode, Denise and I will talk about some books that we've read that we like. And then we'll also talk about some books that we both read, and we might have some disagreements or some agreements on some different facets of the book. And then the other weeks, so my plan is for this to be an every 2-week podcast. So we'll have book club once a month, and then the other 2 weeks I'll interview an author, not me. So I'm the guinea pig for the first one. So anyway, so thank you very much for listening.